Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The suspect in the massacre at the historic Black South Carolina church has been arrested as the nation mourns the killing of 9 victims. 21-year-old Dylan Roth was detained Thursday morning during a traffic stop in North Carolina. A friend of Roth said he wanted to start a new civil war. In a photo posted on Facebook, Dylan Roth is seen wearing a black jacket that prominently features the flags of Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and apartheid-era South Africa, from when the 2 African countries were ruled by the white minority. Another photo appears to show Roth posing in front of a car with a front plate that reads, Confederate States of America. Sylvia Johnson, the cousin of slain pastor Clemente Pinckney, said a survivor of the shooting recounted to her the gunman's stated motives.
She said that he had reloaded 5 different times, and her son was trying to talk him out of doing that act of killing people, and he just said, I have to do it. He said, you rape our women and you taking over our country, and you have to go.
The Department of Justice is investigating Wednesday's attack as a hate crime motivated by racism or other prejudice. We'll spend the rest of the hour on the massacre in Charleston after headlines. The Vatican has unveiled Pope Francis's historic encyclical on climate change, urging world leaders to pay their grave social debt to the poor and take swift action to save the planet from environmental ruin. Pope Francis calls for a change of lifestyle in rich countries steeped in a throwaway consumer culture and an end to obstructionist attitudes that sometimes put profit before the common good. In a nearly 200-page document, the Pope writes, quote, climate change is a global problem with grave implications, environmental, social, economic, political, and for the distribution of goods. It represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity in our day. Presenting the encyclical, a Vatican official said it should encourage the merging of environmental consciousness with spiritual teachings.
As it emerges clearly from the encyclical, the ecological crisis is essentially a spiritual problem. The proper relationship between humanity and the earth, or its natural environment, has been broken with the fall, both outwardly and within us. And this rupture constitutes what we call sin. The Church must now introduce in its teaching about sin, the sin against the environment, the ecological sin. Repentance must be extended to cover also the damage we do to nature, both as individuals and as societies.
The United Nations says the number of people displaced by conflict and persecution has reached nearly 60 million worldwide. The figures include 14 million newly displaced in 2014. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, said refugee numbers are growing while political solutions are dwindling.
Unfortunately, 1 year afterwards, we have to announce that in 2014, we have, at the end, a number of displaced persons by conflict of 59.5 million, what represents an increase of 16% in relation to 2013, and an increase of 60% in relation to 10 years ago. The world has lost much of its capacity to prevent conflicts and to timely solve them, and the result is the dramatic situation we are presenting today. And dramatic not only because there are more and more refugees and displaced persons, but because there are less and less solutions for them.
Workers of Haitian descent held protests in the Dominican Republic Thursday after a deadline passed for them to register their presence or risk mass deportation. 500,000 people could be sent to Haiti under a ruling that stripped the citizenship of children born to Haitian immigrants in the Dominican Republic as far back as 1929, retroactively leaving tens of thousands stateless.
It is an abuse. It is a threat to deport them because their family is here, raised here, and they are Dominicans, as you are, because they were born here. What we want is protection for them.
For los After all the years spent here, I have nothing in Haiti. What I want is to stay here, because this is where I'll receive my pension. I will not collect pension in Haiti.
Dominican officials say they'll begin patrolling migrant neighborhoods to look for those who've not registered. The Dominican Republic's decision to denationalize hundreds of thousands of people has sparked an international outcry. The Greek debt crisis remains at an impasse after talks with Eurozone finance ministers failed to reach a solution. The Greek government and European creditors are at odds over a deal before Greece's current bailout expires at the end of the month. The Greek government's rejected European demands for further pension cuts in exchange for a new loan to help Greece meet its obligations. The Eurozone has rejected Greece's latest proposals, including one that would create a panel to oversee Greece's reforms. IMF chief Christine Lagarde ruled out any extension of Greece's loan payment due at the end of the month.
So, on that particular issue, timeline, 30th of June is the day when the lump sum payment is due to the IMF, and there is no grace period or 2 months delay, as I have seen here and there. On July the 1st, payments not been made.
A new meeting of Eurozone leaders will be held next week. The Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, urged creditors to drop demands that he said would burden Greece's most vulnerable citizens.
So there is no doubt the Greek government is utterly committed to adjusting further. We desperately need these deep reforms, but I urged my colleagues in the Eurogroup to take seriously under consideration the great difference between, on the one hand, reforms that attack parasitic rent-seeking behavior and inefficiencies, and on the other hand, parametric changes that simply jack up already high tax rates and reduce benefits to the weakest.
Aid and medical workers say the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad continues to use weaponized chlorine to attack civilians. Testifying before a House panel, Dr. Annie Sparrow of Human Rights Program urged the imposition of a no-fly zone in Syria.
Creating a no-bomb zone would stop the most important tools that are being used to slaughter and terrorize Syrian civilians, especially the children who are the most vulnerable, as you've seen, to these toxic gases, and whose small bodies are literally ripped apart by the hideous shrapnel filled in these explosive barrel bombs. I'm a doctor, and I'm very familiar with death, but I have never seen a more obscene way to kill children. I've never watched so many suffer in such an obscene manner.
The allegations of chlorine use come as the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has reported progress in its effort to rid the world of the Syrian regime's chemical weapons. The organization says just 16 tons of the 1,300-ton Syrian stockpile remain to be destroyed. The U.S. House of Representatives has revived an effort to speed through approval of the secretive Trans-Pacific Partnership free trade deal. On Thursday, 28 Democrats joined with Republicans to approve a measure that would give President Obama fast-track authority to push the TPP through Congress on a yes or no vote. The move came days after House Democrats led a revolt against fast-track. Speaking ahead of the vote, Democratic Congressmember Rose DeLauro said the TPP will hurt U.S. workers.
The vote last Friday and today's vote are critical in letting the American public know where we stand and that, in fact, we prioritize their economic security, their jobs, their increased wages, that we are opposed to special interests, and that's what this Trans-Pacific Partnership is all about. We must reject this bill.
The fast-track measure now goes to the Senate, where it faces an uncertain future. The Supreme Court has ruled Texas can reject license plates that feature the Confederate flag. A group called the Sons of Confederate Veterans had sought to produce the plates as a tribute to Confederate soldiers. But in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court found license plate designs constitute government speech. 2 police officers in Anniston, Alabama, have been suspended over allegations they belong to a hate group. The Southern Poverty Law Center outed the officers, both lieutenants, as members of the League of the South, a neo-Confederate white supremacist organization. NBC has restored anchor Brian Williams to a new role after a 6-month suspension. Williams was taken off the air for making false statements about a 2003 incident in Iraq. He apologized after it emerged he'd wrongly claimed he was on board a U.S. helicopter downed by rocket fire. American soldiers publicly challenged Williams' account, saying he was nowhere near the aircraft that came under attack. Well, on Thursday, NBC said Williams will no longer anchor the NBC Nightly News, but will take on a new role during the daytime hours at MSNBC. Brian Williams' replacement, Lester Holt, permanently becomes the first African-American to anchor the evening news broadcast at the major networks. ABC reportedly uncovered a number of other instances where Williams made false statements or misleading claims, but says it will not make those findings public. And the U.S. Treasury has announced plans to feature a woman on U.S. currency for the first time in 119 years. Starting in 2020, an as-yet undetermined woman will appear on the $10 bill, replacing Alexander Hamilton. The government is seeking public input on which female historical figure to feature. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.